Hello students, today I am going to talk to you about the status of the untouchables. The proliferation of castes and the presence of untouchables in early medieval Indian society was a significant aspect of social stratification. As it has been pointed out by historian Brojodulal Chattopadhyay, that the social groups associated with what was known as the pollutive manual labor constituted the degraded rank of such untouchables. The status of the untouchables were often defiled as the fifth Varna, placed even below the Shudras and outside the fourfold Varnashrama system. A question of impurity and pollution was attached to this segment of the social order, and they were stigmatized as untouchables. Professor Ranabir Chakraborty, in the same light, has pointed out that a significant section of the population engaged in manual artisanal production and rendering the so-called unclean services was undoubtedly at the receiving end of the Brahminical Varno Jati order. The lawgiver's idea was to relegate menial professional groups and some erstwhile tribal groups to the lowest rung of the social ladder. Proliferation of castes leading to a steady rise in the number of the Shudras, subdivided into several castes and subcastes, some pure and some impure, was definitely noticeable in the early medieval period of Indian history. However, the origin of the untouchables as a separate community originated much before. This can be traced back to the early stage of Indian history. Now coming to the untouchables in ancient India. The Shastras, of which Manusmriti is a very important part, condemned the Antyas or the Antojas to an abode outside the village, which gave them their class or caste character of being the people's end who are supposed to reside on the outskirts of civilized habitat. The words Anto, Antojos, Antobashins, and Ausprisho are mentioned frequently in the Smriti literature and especially in Manusmriti. Almost all these words originated and are derived from the term Anto, except for Ausprisho. This term has been explained by Hindu Orthodox scholars as the one born last, and as the untouchables were born last in the order of Hindu divine creation, so all these group of people were clustered within the common term of the untouchables, and they were pushed into a very segregated position. Both the edicts of Ashoka and the Allahabad pillared inscriptions of Samudragupta use the term Antos to indicate independent people residing beyond the empire but in close proximity of it and as neighbors bordering its outskirts. The question that can be raised in this context is as to why these Antos were not allowed to reside within the villages. This gives us the impression that the Antos or the Antojas were perhaps hereditary untouchable community who were kept at a distance. It was also a common belief that they could never be purified, as the very nature of their work was unclean and pollutive, and it would contaminate the clean, the pure, and the upper Varnas or castes. Manusmriti refers to two types of untouchables. One, untouchability caused by pollution or temporary pollution by an act of contamination. Two, permanent untouchability. Temporary pollution could be taken care of by performing purificatory rites like bathing in holy water, sprinkling of holy water, giving alms to Brahmins, and several other methods of prashchittas as mentioned by Monu. such correctional measures were not applicable to those who were described to be born impure and who died impure. Several factors in the long course of time caused this segmentation of the untouchables within the social order. From the age of the Dharmashastras, one has to move to the medieval phase of Indian history to trace the evolution of such untouchability. Historian R.S. Sharma and the status of the untouchables. The mixed castes who are listed as Shat Shudras or pure Shudras are enumerated in the Brahmo Vaivarta Purana in its Brahmo Kanda. The Shat Shudra group consisted of Gopa, Napito, Bhilo, Swarnakas, Bonikojato, Malakar, Kormokar, Shankhokar, Kubhindako, Kumbhokar, Kongshokar, Sutradhar, Chitrakar, and so on. There were around 17 castes enlisted in Brahmo Vaivarta Purana who happened to be Shat or pure Shudras. But apart from these Shat Shudras, there is a long list of mixed Shudra castes who are also considered as fallen, though not clearly mentioned as Ashat or impure. However, their impurity is indicated by the use of the word adhama or potito. The list of such mixed castes included Attalikakaro, Kotaka, Tivara, Toilokaro, Doshu, Leta, Mollo, Chormokar, Mamoscheda, Bharo, Kola, Kalandara, Chondalo, Karattako, Hari, Dom, Gangaputro, Yavagi, Shundi, Pondrako, Agari, Koivarto, Dhribaro, Rajoko, Koali, Badho, Mahadoshu, Bagotita, Mlecho, Jola, and several other groups. Brahmo Vaivarta Purana thus divided the Shudras into two categories, the Shat or the pure Shudras and the mixed ones, the latter being identified as Potito or Adhamo, and they most probably represented the untouchable segment. The Brihad Dharma Purana also refers to a three-tier classification. 36 mixed castes or mixed Shudras or Shankaras are divided into high, Uttama, middle, Madhyama, and low born or Antaja categories. Of these, the last one, that is the low born or the Antaja category, or so to say, the lowest category consisted of 8 castes such as Malagrahi, Kalabha, and here one interesting thing is to be noted that the Subarna Bonika is included. Perhaps they were demoted from their higher status at some point of time. Then there came the usual Chandalos, the Barudo, the Charmokar, the Dolabahi, and the Mollo Jati. These were outside the fold of the Varnashrama structure. Thus, the non-Shat list of the mixed castes in the Brahmo Vaivarta Purana, along with the Antaja list of the Brihad Dharma Purana, brings us to the number of impure or inferior Shudra castes to 41. The list of impure castes again were not uniform for the entire period. The Dhanukas or the Goars identified with present-day Jadavas were categorized with the Chamars and the Domes by Jyotishwara in his text Varnana Ratnakara, which refers to Mithila in the 13th and the 14th century CE. Even traders or the shavas are included to the category of low caste, or the term Manda Jatiyo, a term which is applicable to all the inferior or impure castes. The medieval era saw a phenomenal growth in the number of such inferior or impure Shudras or untouchables. They were first noted in the 4th century BCE by Panini. Medieval legal texts described the untouchables as beef eaters and list them as Antajas, Bharata, Barudo, Bheda, Bhillo, Chondalo, Charmokar, Dasho, Noto, and Rajoko. These names are quoted by Vasudeva Upadhyaya, who made a survey of the socio-religious conditions of North India in between 700 and 1200 CE. Al-Biruni has also mentioned in his account the presence of such untouchables in early medieval Indian society, and he refers to the Vedas, Tontubayas, Badhatau, Chondal, Dom, and Hari. So all these categories of untouchables are repeatedly mentioned in different literary texts, in the travelogues and other religious texts as well. The rise in the number of untouchables remained an intriguing social factor in early medieval India, as it can be very well seen. Most untouchable castes were less developed tribes whose induction in the Hindu social system was done through Brahminization and through the spread of Hinduized Buddhism. This is inferred from the Brahminical texts and the Buddhist Chaurjapadas. The later texts referred to the Doms and the Nishadas and their women folk, as well as to the Kapaliks. All these communities in general lived on mounds outside the villages. They were regarded as untouchables and or auspicious by the Brahmanas and the other higher castes. As it happened, certain tribal people could not be completely absorbed since they were considered to be excessively backward and in the process pushed to the extreme end of an untouchable status. It may have happened another way also, that such tribal groups offered steep resistance to the process of imperial expansion and induction to the Brahminical social framework. However, ultimately they were overpowered, dispossessed of their lands, and forced to settle outside the villages. This was the case of the Koibartas, who were finally overpowered by the Palas in the 11th century CE. This was perhaps also true of the Dombas, who appear to be an important tribe in Dombi Padacharya. R.S. Sharma further argues that as the process of Brahminization flourished, simultaneously the number of the untouchables rapidly increased. In the earlier phase, certain groups of hunters and artisans were considered to be auspicious, but now even the categories of cultivators were condemned to such caste position. What worked as a factor was the backward character of such agricultural classes. Apart from that, unwillingness of such agriculturists to accept the new order led to further disapproval in the eyes of the Brahminical social order. On a different platform, the fact that many Shudras were reduced to the position of auspicious, ontojas or untouchables gave opportunity to the other segment of the Shudras, that is the pure or the Shat Shudras, to improve their social status, and at this point of time a large number of Shat Shudras were taking the place of the Vaishyas in the social hierarchy. Ranabir Chakraborty and the status of the untouchables. Ranabir Chakraborty reiterates the status of the untouchables in the early medieval period of Indian history in the context of identifying what was known as the unclean labor, as a result of which the providers of the unclean labor were placed at the bottom rung of the social framework, as dominated by the Varno Jati diktat. They were grouped as Antojos or auspicious and located outside the Varnashrama structure. Ranabir Chakraborty refers to Al-Biruni's account where such menial castes has been mentioned in details. The Hindu law books explain their origins out of Pratiloma marriages. The lawgivers focused on degenerating such menial professional groups and the erstwhile tribal groups to the lowest position of the social hierarchy. The Chandalas, the Hari, the Dome, and the Bhadataus were placed even lower than the Antojos. The practice of untouchability constituted the most disreputable and inhuman aspect of the caste society, according to Professor Ranabir Chakraborty. The Varna Jati system, with its inherent inequality, projected its cultural and social intolerance through this system. The commentaries on Jaggo Balku Sriti, Mitakshara, and Aparar Katika blatantly uphold the rules of purification if the higher caste by chance or by accident came into contact with the Antojos or the Chandalas or the similar lower groups. Since the 5th century, the Chandalas were forced to reside outside the settled society in rural as well as in urban areas. Such methods of segregation increased in the first half of the 7th century. Here we come across an example. A pond was required to be constructed outside of Ekagroho, modern Egra, located in Medinipur district, West Bengal. This pond was designated as Chandalo Pushkarini. That is, this pond was earmarked only for the use of the Chandalo community. The instructions found in Mitakshara and Apararo Katika tally with this incident. The word auspicious, referring to an untouchable, appears first in the law book of Vishnu. Chandalo was the first and the foremost to be included in the Antojo auspicious category. Katyayana brought in the Mlechos and the Parashikos, while the touch and sight of other Antojos or the Shudros required ceremonial sipping of holy water, that is, Achmana. The touch of the Chandalas, the Mlechos, and the Parashikas required further actions. Suppose the higher ranks, while taking a meal, came in contact with these three auspicious communities, that is the Chandalas, the Mlechos, and the Parashikas, then it meant defilement and it needed to be cleaned away by bath, according to Atri. The Mitakshara and the Apararokatika stretched the injunctions further by mentioning that purificatory bath was mandatory even if the Chandala came nearer to the higher caste than the length of a cow's tail. In some of the texts, it is also mentioned that the shadow of the Chandalo also, if it fell on the path of a person of a higher caste moving around, then that person had to take a holy bath to purify his status. Therefore, in the early medieval period of Indian history, untouchability not only reached an unprecedented height but also became an effective weapon to ostracize the downtrodden and the dissenter. We learn from R.S. Sharma references that Apararkatika not only branded the Chandalas as auspicious but also mentioned the Buddhists, the Jains, the Lokayatikas, the Nastikas, and followers of Kapila, Shaivas, and Shaktas. Here, one can identify that separate religious groups outside the domain of Brahmana Dharma were penalized equally. The notion of purity and impurity, which could be transmitted through touch, food, and water, had a dominant role to play in the development of the theoretical basis of the notion of untouchability. The Laghu Ashwalayana Sriti, written between 700 and 900 CE, explained that a Brahmin could accept from anyone milk, sugarcane products, and food cooked in oil, milk, or clarified butter, but not in water or not mixed with water. In this injunction, one can identify the formulation of pakka and kacha food as mediums of ritual purity and impurity. Now, coming to the conclusion of this discussion, by extending ostracization and untouchability, the Brahminical society converted a bulk of the population into impure outsiders. The agrarian spread and development of a more complex Varna Jati society indicate the all-pervasive nature of the caste system. The hierarchical social order, further strengthened by religious principles, reflected a kind of rigidity and inflexibility, and the untouchables were the unfortunate victims of such a system. As it has been pointed out by historian Satish Chandra, compared to the Shudras, or so to say, the Shat Shudras in general, the position of the Antajas and the similar groups deteriorated during the early medieval phase. Often treated as an outcast, residing in areas away from the residential areas of the upper castes and the Varnas, debarred from using common water sources even, the situation seemed quite bleak for these unfortunate auspicios. Finally, I would like to mention the observation of Michael Acter. Some concepts, according to Michael Acter, remain alive in the scholarly discourse without any clear justification in the terms of theoretical definition. Untouchability, according to him, is such a concept. It has been justified on empirical criteria which are rooted in folk traditions of social attitudes, and as such, it lacks a clear theoretical understanding. Acter argues that as far as Brahminical articulations are concerned, the concept does rest on well-delimited paradigm. Thus, untouchability as it emerged in ancient Hindu and ancient medieval law books was not just a part of more inclusive complex of purity ideas, but formed exclusive set of rules referring to an exclusive set of social characters and situations. Thank you.